When Kirk Cross unleashed a shocking and painfully personal remark toward Yandy Smith, the tension brewing between them finally boiled over, yet nobody expected it to erupt so openly, fiercely, and emotionally. Those present recall that when Kirk mocked Yandy's role as a mother, something inside Mendeecees broke. With cameras still rolling, the entire cast stood frozen in disbelief. What was supposed to be an ordinary moment on the love and hip-hop set rapidly morphed into a volatile situation ready to detonate. The captured footage, now leaked, has shaken viewers everywhere. The viral footage exposes a side of Mendeecees that fans had never witnessed before. Insiders are labeling it as one of the most intense episodes in Love and Hip Hop's entire history. Now, the fan base is left grappling with tough questions. How did it escalate so far, and can this bond ever truly be mended? Mendeecees unleashed everything, not just his words, but also his raw emotions and fierce reactions. Yandy's name was not simply insulted, it was dragged harshly, and Mendeecees was not about to ignore it. Tensions were sky-high as the Love and Hip Hop crew gathered for another dramatic shoot. But no one was truly ready for the eruption that was about to unfold. Mendeecees Harris and Kirk Frost, two of the show's most talked-about figures, had been clashing for weeks, with whispers of their feud spreading across the set. Still, nothing the public had seen could match this moment. The cameras kept rolling as what was meant to be a scripted confrontation escalated into something far more explosive. It all seemed harmless at first. Mendeecees and Kirk were simply set to film a scene where they would discuss matters concerning the family. Their future was the topic, but Kirk, ever the agitator, could not stop himself from crossing lines during what should have been a light-hearted exchange. His biting comments about Yandy, Mendeecees' wife, left the entire room stunned. "I am just saying," Kirk began, trying to sound nonchalant. "Maybe if Yandy stopped always playing the victim instead of acting like some saint, she would not have so many problems with her kids." His words hung heavy, poisoning the atmosphere. Mendeecees' face stiffened, shifting from confusion to pure fury within seconds. Even the crew, used to chaos, stood. The crew stood on edge, sensing that something was seriously different this time. Mendeecees, known for his usually composed nature, was visibly rattled with rage, struggling to digest Kirk's biting words. Everyone understood how deeply Yandy mattered to Mendeecees, and Kirk's jab was a low blow. It was not merely an insult to her parenting, it was an attack on everything Yandy represented. Kirk had overstepped, and Mendeecees had no intention of letting it pass. The tension was thick, as though the entire room held its breath, bracing for the moment Mendeecees finally responded. His voice, at first, was chillingly calm. Beneath the calm, anger simmered within Mendeecees. He denied Kirk the pleasure of a back-and-forth argument. Instead, he stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury. "Don't talk about Yandy like that," he spat. The tension in the room shifted as everyone exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that things were about to spiral out of control. Kirk, the instigator, smirked, seemingly confident he could push Mendeecees further. But before anyone could react, Mendeecees slapped Kirk across the face with such intensity that the entire room gasped. The resounding sound of the slap echoed through the impact of the slap wasn't just physical, it was the raw emotion that left everyone in shock. Mendeecees had never been so unrestrained on set, and the cameras captured every second of it. For a brief moment, Kirk stood still, his hand hovering near his cheek, still stinging from Mendeecees' slap. He had never imagined it would escalate this far. Used to playing the villain and stirring up drama, Kirk hadn't expected this. But Mendeecees' slap wasn't just about a petty disagreement. It was a declaration. Mendeecees was willing to go to any lengths to defend his family, his pride, and his love for Yandy. The camera crew, who had been documenting the entire shoot, suddenly found themselves thrust into a chaotic situation they hadn't prepared for. Meanwhile, another cast member seized the opportunity to steal the spotlight, stoking drama to draw attention, while also showing clear hostility toward Rasheeda. The silence of the men in the face of such serious accusations raised questions among the others. Soon the situation took a darker turn, as rumors spread online about secret meetings, cryptic messages, and deepening tensions. Now fully in damage control, Mode, Yandy, and Mendeecees, Yandy began reaching out to close friends and family, desperately trying to uncover more about what was happening. She couldn't understand why Mendeecees wasn't being more open with her. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Some followers claimed that Rita had video evidence to support her accusations, but no one knew exactly what that evidence was. Others suggested it was text messages or photos showing Mendeecees admitting to their night together. The longer Mendeecees stayed silent, the more questions arose. Was he hiding something? Or was there Rita, on the other hand, reveled in her role as the provocateur? She knew the chaos she had stirred and was soaking in every second of it. She stoked the rumors on social media, posting, "If they want the truth, they'll get it." She focused on the public, maintaining control over the narrative with every new update. The Love and Hip Hop cast, no strangers to drama, now found themselves tangled in something far deeper. Eventually, Mendeecees broke his silence once more, but this time his response was even more vague than before. Mendeecees wrote, "The truth will always come to light." While some chose to remain silent, others felt the need to speak out on the escalating turmoil. However, everyone agreed on one thing. This was no ordinary scandal. It wasn't just another caste argument. It was a shocking revelation that threatened to tear apart relationships and families. The world watched as it all unfolded in real time, and it felt deeply personal. The stakes were higher than ever. Rita had driven a massive wedge between Mendeecees and Yandy, a relationship that was already on. Everyone was left wondering what was truly going on. Who was manipulating the situation for their own benefit, and who was speaking the truth? The fallout from Rita's accusations had only just begun to unfold. It was impossible to predict how everything would play out. The public was free to interpret every message as they saw fit. Was Mendeecees confessing, or was he attempting to cover up the truth? As the days went by, the controversy surrounding Rita's bombshell revelation about spending the night with Mendeecees only grew. Social media exploded with heated debates flooded social media. Every post and comment only fueled the fire. Fans were hungry for the next piece of the puzzle. Would Mendeecees finally come clean? Would Rasheeda and Yandy face off? One thing was certain, the world was watching, and the drama was far from over, exposing their family to even more public scrutiny. Mendeecees couldn't shake the thought that he had just handed Kirk, Yandy, and the producers exactly what they wanted. More drama, more spectacle. Did I just feed into their game? Mendeecees wondered aloud, pacing the room. It's part of this circus, but now it felt like Mendeecees was just another puppet in the game. On the other hand, Kirk was trying to brush off the incident, but deep down, he knew he couldn't escape the consequences. He had misjudged Mendeecees, thinking he could push his buttons too many times without repercussions. For years, Kirk had taken pride in being the one who stirred up drama, but now he was facing the consequences of his own actions. However, now that the roles were reversed, he was struggling to keep his cool. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Kirk said, shaking his head as he spoke with Jonathan. "I was just speaking my mind. I didn't think he'd actually do something like that." Despite Kirk's attempts to downplay the situation, the damage was already done, and Mendeecees had made it clear that he wouldn't stand for anyone disrespecting his family. The tension was now undeniable, not just on set but also among the cast. Even people who had once been close to Kirk, like Rasheeda, were starting to question his intentions. "Kirk, you've crossed the line," Rasheeda told him in a firm voice. You've always pushed buttons, but this is different. You shouldn't have done that," Rasheeda told him. Kirk tried to defend himself, but the hurt in Rasheeda's eyes was too powerful to ignore. She had seen how much people cared for Yandy, and now she was starting to see Kirk's true nature. One fan tweeted, "Kirk has been acting like a bully for years. He got what he deserved." But other fans were less forgiving. "Violence is never the answer," one wrote. Another added, "I get that Kirk was out of line, but Mendeecees went too far. It's just a show. They should have kept it professional." Entertainment. Outlets and social media were flooded with posts about the altercation. Fans couldn't stop discussing the shocking slap, debating whether Kirk had pushed Mendeecees too far or whether Mendeecees had been justified. It was no surprise that Mendeecees snapped. Yandy was caught in the middle of the media frenzy. While she was grateful that Mendeecees had defended her, Yandy also understood the negative impact of such a public display. Their family was now under intense scrutiny, and Yandy was struggling to manage the stress. "This isn't what I wanted," Yandy told Amina in a tearful voice. "I don't want my family torn apart by this show. I just want us to be happy, to be left alone. But now it feels like everything we've built is falling apart." Backstage, the cast was getting ready for the next big scene. Everyone knew the TT were about to be used as entertainment. The next episode promised even more fireworks, shocking twists, and raw emotions. But no one knew if the cast could survive the fallout. The tension that had been growing between Kirk and Mendeecees for the past few days was about to reach a new boiling point. The producers had been carefully planning the next confrontation, fully aware that it would be the moment viewers had been waiting for. The cameras were prepared to capture every word, every glance, and every tense pause. And with millions of viewers, there was. No one knew how this drama would end. The set was bustling with activity as everyone prepared for the next round of filming. But despite all the build-up, no one could have predicted just how explosive the situation would become. Mendeecees, still visibly shaken from the altercation with Kirk, paced back and forth in his dressing room, unable to shake the feeling that everything he had worked for was on the line. His reputation, his family, and his future in the industry were all at risk because of the actions that had been set into motion. Though he despised the drama, he knew he couldn't back down. Kirk had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. "I have to defend my family, which includes confronting Kirk," Mendeecees whispered to himself as he ran a hand through his hair. "If I don't, what kind of guy am I?" His feelings were a whirlwind of rage, frustration, and fear. He understood that adding more drama wouldn't help, but he also knew he couldn't let Kirk get away with what he had said. It wasn't just about protecting Yandy anymore. It was about showing everyone that he wasn't someone who could be bullied. He had to stand up for what he believed in. Meanwhile, Kirk was still in shock. "I never thought Mendeecees would actually hit me," he told Jonathan in a low, regretful voice. "He's always been a bit of a hothead, but I didn't think it would escalate like this." Kirk's hands were shaking as he spoke, trying to keep it together, but the guilt was overwhelming. In the aftermath of the slap, the days had been a blur of interviews, media attention, and angry messages from fans. He'd never been in this situation. Before, normally he was the one causing the drama and the chaos. Although he knew he had pushed Mendeecees too far, he wasn't ready to publicly admit it. He wasn't prepared to take full responsibility for the mess he had caused. "You have to own this, Kirk," Jonathan said firmly. "You weren't ready to take full responsibility." Mendeecees didn't just snap out of nowhere. "You've been poking at him for weeks, maybe even months. This was a long time coming." Kirk's face fell as Jonathan's words hit home. He had always been skilled at shifting blame and manipulating situations to his advantage. But now, he was starting to realize that he couldn't escape the truth. His actions had led them to this point, and there was no avoiding the fallout. "I just hope he's not planning something worse when we get on set today," Kirk muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Can't take this any further." Everyone knew the producers were eager to capture the next major altercation, but no one could predict what would unfold when Mendeecees and Kirk were in the same room. The rest of the cast had been instructed to stay out of the way, letting the two men handle their problems themselves. But the reality was, no one could look away from what was unfolding. The set was tense, and the crew was on edge because they knew that today could be the day everything either calmed down or exploded. Once more. Mendeecees and Kirk were positioned on opposite sides of the set as the crew prepared for the scene. Both men were tense, their faces tight with emotion. Mendeecees had been holding his anger inside for days, and Kirk, despite his earlier attempts to downplay it, was clearly nervous about facing him again. The time had come. There was no turning back. "Now you think I'm just going to forget what you said about Yandy?" Mendeecees asked, his voice low and dangerous as he glared at Kirk, watching to see how he would react. Kirk shifted uncomfortably but didn't back down. "I didn't mean to disrespect her," he said, his voice shaky but defiant. "I was just speaking my mind. You know how I am. But you're not the only one with emotions, Mendez. You think I'm just supposed to sit back and take it every time you play the hero? It's not like that. I've been in this business too long to let anyone talk down to me, even if it's you." Words were full of bitterness. The anger in his voice was undeniable. "You've crossed the line, Kirk," Mendeecees shot back, fists clenched at his sides, his voice rising. "You've always thought you could get away with whatever you wanted. But not anymore. This isn't just about Yandy anymore. It's about respect. It's about boundaries, and you don't get to violate them." The confrontation was rapidly intensifying, and the producers knew they had to capture every moment of it. The cameras were rolling, and the entire set was silent, except for the heated exchange taking place. "You want respect? Mendez? Maybe you should start respecting me." Kirk spat, his voice sharp and full of contempt. "I'm not scared of you. You think I'm scared of you?" For a moment, it seemed like he might attack Mendez again, fueled by the emotion in his voice, but security intervened swiftly, breaking them apart. The producers signaled for a break the moment they sensed it. Mendez and Kirk were escorted to opposite corners of the set as the crew scrambled to diffuse the tension. Both men were visibly shaken. The air was thick with unresolved tension. What had started as a simple verbal argument had now evolved into something much more intricate. The lines were clearly drawn, and it felt like there was no turning back. The drama was just beginning to unfold. Cast members whispered among themselves, while the producers gathered to decide whether to continue filming or shut it down. Meanwhile, network executives watched everything unfold live in the control room. One of them, a woman seasoned in handling talent disputes, leaned back and muttered quietly, "This is too real. We need to step in before it becomes something bigger." Mendez, mentally checked out, sat on a couch in the corner, his breath coming in heavy sighs as he stared blankly at the floor, trying to hold in the emotional storm raging inside.